My name is Josephine and I'm 65 years old. I built a successful chain of grocery stores in Boston from nothing but determination and hard work. My son Andrew, his wife Natalie, and my grandson Tyler were supposed to inherit everything I've built. But that all changed the day Natalie pointed at me in my own store and told the clerk, "That old woman is the maid, don't talk to her." What hurt even more was seeing my own son and grandson laughing along. They had no idea I owned the entire chain of stores they were standing in. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you believe families should be built on respect, not disrespect, hit that like button and subscribe. You'll want to hear what happened when they discovered who I really was and why I decided that same day to cancel their inheritance. I wasn't always the owner of a successful grocery chain. I started with absolutely nothing. Growing up in a small town outside of Boston, my parents struggled to make ends meet. My father worked at the local factory, and my mother cleaned houses for the wealthy families in the neighboring suburbs. They taught me the value of hard work, integrity, and saving for the future, lessons that would shape my entire life. After graduating high school, I couldn't afford college, so I took a job as a cashier at a local grocery store called Miller's Market. I still remember my first day. The scratchy polyester uniform, the complicated cash register that intimidated me, and the kindly store manager who assured me I'd get the hang of it. I worked double shifts whenever I could, studying how the business operated during every spare moment. "You've got a good head for business, Josie," Mr. Miller would tell me. "You notice things other people don't." He was right. I observed how the store layout affected shopping patterns, which products sold better at eye level, and how pricing strategies influenced customer behavior. By the time I was 23, I had been promoted to assistant manager. By 25, I was managing the entire store. It was during this time that I met Harold, the love of my life. He came in every Thursday evening to do his shopping, always with a list meticulously organized by store sections. I found it endearing how methodical he was. "I'm an engineer," he explained when I finally worked up the courage to comment on his shopping efficiency. "I approach everything like a system that can be optimized." Harold was handsome, intelligent, and kind. Our courtship was a whirlwind, and within a year, we were married. Harold believed in me and my dreams in ways no one else ever had. When I told him I wanted to someday own my own grocery store, he didn't laugh or dismiss it as a woman's fantasy as others had. Instead, he sat with me at our small kitchen table, helping me draft business plans and financial projections. "You understand people and what they need," he would say. "That's more valuable than any business degree." We saved every penny we could. Harold continued his engineering work, and I kept managing Miller's Market, learning everything I could about the grocery business. When Mr. Miller decided to retire 10 years later, he approached me first about buying the store. "I can't think of anyone who would take better care of this place and the customers than you, Josie," he said. With our savings and a small business loan that Harold's steady engineering job helped us secure, we became the proud owners of what would become the first store in the Josephine's Fresh Market chain. I renamed it not out of ego, but because Harold insisted. "People should know whose vision they're experiencing when they walk through those doors," he said. The first few years were challenging. We reinvested every bit of profit back into the business, upgrading equipment, improving the selection, and focusing on fresh local products before that approach became trendy. Harold would come in after his engineering job to help with inventory repairs or whatever was needed. We were partners in every sense of the word. During these busy years, we were blessed with our son Andrew. From the moment he was born, he was the center of our universe. Despite the demands of the growing business, I made sure to be present for him. He would often sit in a playpen in my office at the store, surrounded by toys, but always more interested in watching the hustle and bustle around him. As Andrew grew, so did our business. By the time he was 10, we had opened 2 more locations. By his high school graduation, Josephine's Fresh Market had become a respected regional chain with 12 stores across Massachusetts. Harold had eventually left his engineering job to work alongside me full-time, handling the operational and technical aspects while I focused on merchandise, customer experience, and expansion. "We make a good team, Josie," Harold would say, wrapping his arms around me as we looked at the plans for yet another new location. "Always have." We were happily married for 30 wonderful years. Harold was not just my husband, but my best friend, my business partner, and my rock. Our son Andrew graduated from college with a business degree, and though we hoped he might someday take an interest in the family business, he was drawn to the fast-paced world of financial consulting. We supported his choice, proud of his independence and success. Life was good until 8 years ago, when everything changed in an instant. Harold was driving home from inspecting a potential new store location when another driver ran a red light and crashed into his car. He died at the scene. The doctor told me he didn't suffer, but that was little comfort as my world collapsed around me. The months after Harold's death were a blur of grief, funeral arrangements, and the overwhelming task of running the business alone. By then, we had expanded to 20 stores across New England, with hundreds of employees depending on me. Many expected me to sell the business, unable to imagine a woman in her late 50s managing such an operation by herself, especially while grieving. But the business became my lifeline, the thing that got me out of bed each morning. I threw myself into work, expanding our charitable initiatives and community involvement, because that's what Harold would have wanted. We had always believed that a business should serve its community, not just profit from it. Andrew was supportive during this time, flying back from New York, where he lived at least twice a month to check on me. He would sit with me in the evenings, looking through old photo albums and sharing memories of his father. "Dad would be so proud of you, Mom," he would say, carrying on with the business, making it even better. It was during one of these visits, about 3 years after Harold's death, that Andrew mentioned he'd met someone special. "Her name is Natalie," he said, his face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen since before his father died. "She works in media relations for a big cosmetics company. She's amazing, Mom. Smart, beautiful, ambitious." I was thrilled that Andrew had found someone who made him happy. When he brought Natalie to meet me a few months later, my first impression was mixed. She was indeed beautiful, tall, blonde, impeccably dressed in designer clothes that probably cost more than what most of my employees made in a month. She was articulate and charming, asking questions about my life and the business that seemed genuine enough. But there was something in her eyes when she looked around my home, a calculating assessment that made me uneasy. She seemed less interested in the family photos and mementos than in the value of the artwork on the walls or the antique furniture Harold and I had collected over the years. "This house is absolutely gorgeous, Josephine," she gushed. "It must be worth millions in this neighborhood." Still, I was determined to give her the benefit of the doubt. Andrew was clearly in love, and I wanted to support his happiness. They were married in an extravagant ceremony at one of New York's most exclusive venues a year later. I found the whole affair unnecessarily ostentatious, but I kept my thoughts to myself. This was their day, not mine. Andrew had mentioned during their engagement that Natalie didn't know the full extent of our family's wealth. For reasons I never fully understood, he had downplayed his background, telling her only that his parents had owned a few grocery stores. "I wanted her to love me for me, Mom, not for any potential inheritance," he explained. I respected his decision, though I found it odd that even after they were engaged, he continued the charade. By this point, Josephine's Fresh Market had grown to over 30 stores across New England, with annual revenues in the hundreds of millions. We had been featured in business magazines, and I had won several entrepreneurial awards. A simple internet search would have revealed much more than a few grocery stores. When Tyler was born a year after their wedding, I was overjoyed to become a grandmother. He was a bright, curious child with Harold's thoughtful eyes and analytical mind. During the early years of his life, Natalie seemed to be a devoted mother, and Andrew thrived in his role as a father. They would bring Tyler to visit me in Boston every few months, and I treasured those times. I never explicitly told Andrew, Natalie, or even young Tyler, about the true extent of the business or my wealth. They knew I was comfortable and successful, but I had always been private about financial matters. To them, I was simply a grandmother who happened to work as a senior advisor for a grocery chain, a partial truth that became more misleading as the years passed and the business continued to grow. Perhaps this was my first mistake, not being transparent about who I really was and what I had built. But at the time, it seemed prudent to separate my family life from my business empire. Little did I know how this decision would come to haunt me in ways I never could have imagined. The changes in Natalie's attitude toward me began subtly so gradually that at first I questioned whether I was imagining things. After about 2 years of marriage, her phone calls became less frequent, her texts more perfunctory. When they visited, she would often be tired or have work to catch up on, leaving Andrew and Tyler to spend time with me alone. I still remember the first time I noticed a truly dismissive comment. We were having dinner at a restaurant during one of their visits to Boston, and I was telling a story about the early days of the business. Harold and I used to count inventory until 2 in the morning sometimes, I was saying. We couldn't afford to hire extra help back then. That's sweet, Natalie interrupted, not looking up from her phone. But those stories about the olden days are probably boring, Tyler. Right, honey? She ruffled my grandson's hair, who looked confused rather than bored. I like Grandma's stories, Tyler said quietly, but Natalie had already changed the subject to their upcoming vacation to the Bahamas. That night I brushed it off as a one-time occurrence, but similar incidents followed with increasing frequency. Natalie would check her watch conspicuously when I spoke sigh loudly or simply start a separate conversation with Andrew or Tyler. The message became clear: my thoughts, my experiences, my very presence was something to be tolerated rather than valued. As Tyler grew older, I noticed Natalie's influence on him as well. He had once been eager to help me in the garden during visits, asking questions about each plant and listening attentively to my answers. Now at age 12, he was often glued to his expensive tablet, responding to my questions with one-word answers. "Why does Grandma wear those old-fashioned clothes?" I overheard him ask his mother once after I'd left the room to get dessert. "Because she's from a different generation, honey," Natalie replied loud enough for me to hear from the kitchen. They didn't care about appearance as much back then. I looked down at my outfit, a simple but well-made cashmere sweater and tailored pants that had cost more than Natalie might guess. I had never been one for flashy designer labels, preferring quality and comfort over brands. But her comments stung nonetheless. Andrew's behavior changed too, though less dramatically. He became the perpetual mediator, always trying to smooth over tensions with platitudes and changed subjects. "Mom, you know how Natalie gets when she's stressed about work," he would say, after she'd made a particularly cutting remark. Or, "She doesn't mean anything by it. That's just her sense of humor." I tried to speak with him directly about the issue during a rare moment alone while Natalie had taken Tyler shopping. "Andrew, I feel like Natalie doesn't respect me," I said carefully. "Some of her comments are hurtful." He sighed, running his hand through his hair, just like Harold used to do when confronted with an uncomfortable topic. "Mom, you're being too sensitive," he said. "Natalie is just very direct. She was raised differently than we were. Her family is more formal." "There's a difference between formal and disrespectful," I pointed out. "Look, she's trying." Andrew set his tone, making it clear the conversation was over. "Can you try too? For me and for Tyler?" So I tried. I bit my tongue when Natalie referred to my home as quaint, in a tone that suggested it was anything but. I smiled when she helpfully suggested hairstylists or clothing stores that might help me update my look. I pretended not to notice when she ushered Tyler away from me at family gatherings, steering him toward more important people to talk to. The situation deteriorated further when Natalie began canceling their visits to Boston at the last minute, always with some urgent work crisis or social obligation that couldn't possibly be rescheduled. The 3 times a year I had previously seen my son and grandson dwindled to once, maybe twice if I was lucky. Even more disturbing was when I began hearing rumors through family friends that Natalie was suggesting I was experiencing cognitive decline. "Josephine is getting so forgetful," she apparently told my niece at a family wedding I couldn't attend due to a business emergency. "We're getting concerned about her living alone in that big house." This was particularly galling, as I was sharper than ever running a business empire that had now expanded to include specialty organic markets and a successful line of prepared foods. My memory and decision-making abilities were tested daily in high-stakes business situations, and I had never missed a beat. Holidays became particularly difficult. What should have been joyous family occasions turned into carefully choreographed performances where Natalie played the role of the dutiful daughter-in-law for the minimum time required before making excuses to leave early. Last Christmas was especially painful. I had spent weeks preparing Tyler's favorite foods, buying thoughtful gifts, and decorating the house as I had when Andrew was a child. They arrived 3 hours late, with Natalie immediately complaining about the traffic and making it clear they could only stay for dinner, not overnight as originally planned. "We have brunch with the Richardsons tomorrow," she explained, referring to a family I'd never heard of. "They're very well connected in the media world. Can't miss it." Throughout dinner, Natalie dominated the conversation with stories about their social climbing successes, the exclusive school Tyler had been accepted to, the celebrity she'd met at a work function, the summer home they were considering in the Hamptons, though I knew Andrew's salary, while generous, couldn't possibly support such a purchase. When Tyler opened the astronomy telescope I'd bought him, remembering his fascination with stars during his last visit, Natalie quickly interjected, "That's thoughtful, Josephine, but Tyler's into soccer now, aren't you, honey?" she prompted, giving him a look that clearly communicated the expected response. "Yeah, I guess," Tyler mumbled, setting aside the telescope with barely a glance. Later, as they were preparing to leave far earlier than I'd hoped, I overheard Natalie in the hallway. "God, I thought that would never end," she whispered to Andrew. "Next year, let's just send a card. Your mother gets more depressing every time we see her." I pretended not to hear as I helped Tyler into his coat, trying to maintain my dignity, despite the knife twisting in my heart. As I hugged my grandson goodbye, he stiffened in my embrace, clearly uncomfortable with physical affection from his depressing grandmother. That night, alone in my house with the Christmas tree lights blinking in an empty living room, I wept for the first time in years. Not just for myself, but for what my family had become, for what Natalie had turned them into, and for what Andrew had allowed to happen. But I had no idea that the worst was yet to come, or that a routine visit to one of my stores would finally force me to face the painful reality of how my family truly saw me. The day that changed everything started like any other. It was a Tuesday morning in early April, and I had decided to make an unannounced visit to our flagship store in downtown Boston. As the owner of the company, I could have easily called ahead had the red carpet rolled out and been treated like royalty. But that wasn't my style, nor was it an effective way to see how the stores really operated. Harold and I had established this practice years ago, showing up unannounced, dressed in casual clothes, observing the store as regular customers would experience it. The employees knew I did this occasionally, but with over 30 locations and hundreds of staff members, many newer employees had never met me in person. That morning I dressed in simple jeans, a light blue sweater, and comfortable walking shoes. I wore minimal makeup and pulled my silver hair back in a simple ponytail. At 65, I didn't try to hide my age, but I took care of myself. I was fit from my regular swimming routine and yoga classes, though I certainly didn't look like the powerhouse businesswoman featured in last month's Women in Business magazine. I drove myself to the store, parking in the regular customer section rather than the reserved spots near the entrance. The spring air was crisp flowers just beginning to bloom in the planters outside the store. I felt a surge of pride as I approached the building. The Josephine's Fresh Market sign gleamed in the morning sunlight, the windows spotless, the displays of fresh produce visible from the street, looking vibrant and appealing. This particular location had recently undergone a major renovation with an expanded organic section and a new cafe area where customers could enjoy freshly prepared foods. I wanted to see how customers were responding to the changes and whether the new layout was functioning as well in practice as it had looked on paper. I grabbed a shopping basket and began making my way through the store, noting the cleanliness of the floors, the freshness of the produce, the friendliness of the staff interactions with customers. Most employees were too busy to pay much attention to me, exactly as it should be. They were focused on their tasks and on the customers who needed assistance. I was in the bakery section, inspecting a new line of artisan breads we had recently introduced, when I heard familiar voices from the next aisle. My heart did a little jump of surprise and pleasure. Andrew, Natalie, and Tyler were here in Boston. They hadn't mentioned they were coming to town. My first instinct was to hurry around the corner and greet them, but something made me hesitate. They didn't know I made these store visits, and I was curious about what had brought them here. Were they planning to surprise me later? I moved closer to the end of the aisle where I could hear their conversation without being immediately visible. "This place has really improved since the last time we were here," Natalie was saying. "Still not as nice as Whole Foods, but at least they have those imported cheeses you like now." "Josephine's has always had good quality," Andrew replied. "Mom used to bring me to the original store when I was Tyler's age." "God, does everything have to be a trip down memory lane with your mother?" Natalie's voice had that edge to it I'd grown familiar with. "We're just here to grab a few things before heading to the hotel. Speaking of which, did you confirm our dinner reservations at Maison Laurent?" I stood frozen basket in hand. They were in Boston and hadn't even told me they were coming. Were not planning to see me at all? The realization felt like ice water in my veins. I was about to step around the corner to make my presence known when a young clerk approached them. "Finding everything okay today?" he asked cheerfully. "We just got those imported chocolates in this morning if you're looking for something special." He was new. I'd seen his employment paperwork cross my desk the previous month. Jake, if I remembered correctly. Eager, hard-working, putting himself through college. What happened next burned itself into my memory with such clarity that I can recall every excruciating detail. Natalie looked the young man up and down with the dismissive gaze I'd been on the receiving end of so many times. She gestured in my direction, though from her angle she couldn't see me clearly, just the edge of my blue sweater. "That old woman is the maid. Don't talk to her," Natalie said loudly, her voice carrying through the store. "She works for us, but forgets her place sometimes. Just ignore her if she starts rambling." Jake's face registered confusion, looking between Natalie and the direction she had pointed, where I stood partially concealed by a display. "Excuse me," he asked, clearly uncomfortable. That's when Andrew and Tyler both burst out laughing. Not just a chuckle, but full-throated laughter that echoed through the store. "Mom, stop it," Andrew said between laughs, not sounding the least bit disapproving. "You're terrible." "What?" "It's funny," Natalie defended herself. "She does look like someone's housekeeper in those clothes, probably cleans houses to supplement her Social Security." Tyler was practically doubled over with laughter now. "Totally, Mom. She looks just like our old janitor at school." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. My son, my grandson, laughing at the idea that a woman my age dressed simply must be someone's maid, finding humor in the thought that I should be ignored, that my words would be nothing but rambling. And in that moment I realized that this wasn't new behavior. This was simply the first time I was witnessing how they spoke about me when I wasn't around. The disrespect I'd felt from Natalie hadn't been my imagination or sensitivity. It had been just the tip of the iceberg. Jake was still standing there awkwardly, clearly wanting to escape the situation, but trapped by customer service obligations. Well, if you need anything, just let me know," he managed, backing away. "Actually," Natalie said, stopping him, "we're looking for the imported coffee. The good kind, not the cheap stuff most people buy." I'd heard enough. Something snapped inside me. Not in a way that made me want to scream or cry, but in a way that brought perfect clarity. With a calm I didn't know I possessed, I stepped around the display and walked directly toward them. Andrew saw me first, his face registering shock, then confusion, and finally the dawning horror of recognition. "Mom," he said, his voice strangled, "what are you doing here?" Before I could answer, the store manager, David, spotted me from across the floor. He'd been with the company for 15 years, working his way up from stock boy to management. He hurried over with a broad smile. "Mrs. Josephine." "What a wonderful surprise!" he exclaimed loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "We weren't expecting you today. How are you finding everything?" "The new layout is working beautifully. Customer flow has improved by 23%, and the cafe is exceeding all our projections." The look on Natalie's face was something I will never forget. Shock giving way to confusion, then to dawning realization, and finally to something akin to terror. Tyler had stopped laughing abruptly, his young face flushing red. Andrew looked like he might be sick. "The new organic produce section is particularly impressive, David," I replied, my voice steady. "The local farm partnerships are clearly paying off. The quality is exceptional." "Thank you, ma'am. We implemented all your recommendations from the executive meeting last month. The team has been working overtime to get everything perfect." He beamed with pride, completely oblivious to the family drama unfolding before him. Natalie had gone pale, her perfectly made-up face now ashen. "Executive meeting," she whispered. I turned to her with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Yes, Natalie. The executive meeting I lead every month as the owner and CEO of Josephine's Fresh Market, all 34 stores in the chain. I paused, letting the information sink in. The chain your husband told you was just a few grocery stores his parents owned. Young Jake was still standing nearby, his eyes wide as he put together what was happening. I turned to him with genuine warmth. Jake, isn't it? How are your business classes going? I remember from your application that you're studying marketing at Boston University. They're going well, Mrs. Josephine, he stammered clearly, shocked that the CEO knew who he was. Thank you for asking. Wonderful. Keep up the good work. I turned back to my family, who still stood frozen in shock. Now, I believe you were looking for our imported coffee. It's in aisle 9. The good kind, as you put it, is on the top shelf. We import it directly from small batch roasters in Colombia and Ethiopia. I selected them myself. Andrew finally found his voice. Mom, we can explain. Natalie was just joking around. She didn't mean... I held up my hand, stopping him mid-sentence. I think I heard exactly what she meant, Andrew, and I saw exactly how you and Tyler responded. My voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it now. David, would you mind showing my son, daughter-in-law, and grandson to my office after they've finished their shopping? I think we need to have a private conversation. Of course, Mrs. Josephine, right away. As David escorted me toward the back of the store, I could feel the weight of stares from customers and employees who had witnessed the exchange. I held my head high, my back straight, channeling every ounce of the dignity that Natalie had tried to strip from me with her cruel words. In that moment, walking through the store I had built from nothing, I knew exactly what needed to happen next. The decision that had been forming in my mind for months had crystallized into perfect clarity. Sometimes it takes a moment of absolute disrespect to show you exactly who people are and what you need to do about it. Alone in my office at the back of the store, I took a moment to collect myself. The space was modest but elegant. I had never believed in ostentatious displays of power or wealth. A simple desk of polished walnut that had once belonged to Harold, comfortable chairs for meetings, and walls lined with photographs chronicling the history of Josephine's Fresh Market. There I was with Harold at the ribbon cutting of our first store, both of us looking so young and hopeful. There we were opening our 10th location with Andrew as a teenager standing proudly between us. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the phone and dialed a familiar number. Jessica Morgan's office, answered the crisp voice of my attorney's assistant. This is Josephine Wilson. I need to speak with Jessica as soon as possible regarding changes to my will and estate planning. Of course, Mrs. Wilson. Let me put you through right away. There was a brief pause before Jessica came on the line. We had worked together for over 15 years, and she had helped structure both the business and my personal affairs through expansion, Harold's death, and various transitions. Josephine, this is unexpected. Is everything all right? Her voice held genuine concern. No, Jessica, it's not. I've just had a rather illuminating experience with my family, and I need to make immediate changes to my will and succession plans for the company. I explained briefly what had happened in the store, keeping my voice steady, despite the emotion threatening to break through. Jessica listened without interrupting, then said, I understand. This is significant. What changes are you considering? A complete revision. Andrew will no longer be my primary beneficiary, nor will he have any role in the company's future. The same goes for Tyler, though I may establish some form of trust that becomes available to him when he's older, with specific conditions. That's a substantial change from your current arrangements, Jessica noted cautiously. The company and your personal assets represent millions. Have you considered that this incident, while certainly painful, might be addressed in ways other than disinheritance? I appreciated her measured response. It was her job to ensure I wasn't making rash decisions I might later regret. This isn't about one incident, Jessica. It's about a pattern of behavior and a fundamental lack of respect that has become impossible to ignore. What I witnessed today was simply the final confirmation of something I've suspected for years. I understand, she replied. In that case, I can see you tomorrow morning at 9. We'll need to discuss alternative beneficiaries and structure for your estate. Charitable foundations, perhaps. other family members, key employees. All of the above, I confirmed. I'll have some ideas prepared by tomorrow. As I hung up, there was a knock at the door. David entered, looking uncomfortable. "They're here, Mrs. Josephine. Your family." "Thank you, David. Please send them in." Andrew entered first, his face a mask of anxiety and shame. Natalie followed her earlier haughtiness, replaced by a carefully constructed expression of contrition that didn't reach her eyes. Tyler came last, looking at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. "Please sit down," I said, gesturing to the chairs across from my desk. They complied silently. The atmosphere was thick with tension. "I imagine you have questions," I began. "Mom, why didn't you ever tell us?" Andrew blurted out. "All these years you let us believe you were just some kind of advisor or manager. Why the secrecy?" This was not the apology I had expected, and it struck me as telling that his first reaction was to question my choices rather than acknowledge their behavior. "I never lied to you, Andrew. You knew I worked with the business your father and I built. You simply never asked about the details, and over time it became clear that you weren't particularly interested in knowing. But this is—" he gestured around the office. "You're running an empire. The signs all say Josephine's, for God's sake." "Yes, they do," I agreed calmly. "And yet you never connected that to me. Perhaps because you stopped seeing me as someone capable of building and running something successful. Or perhaps because Natalie's narrative about your old, outdated mother was more convenient to believe." Natalie shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Josephine, about what happened out there. It was just a silly joke. I never would have said those things if I'd known who you really were." Her words hung in the air, revealing far more than she intended. She wasn't sorry for what she'd said, only that she'd said it to someone with power and money. "And that's precisely the problem, isn't it, Natalie? You believe it's acceptable to mock and degrade someone you perceive as beneath you, a maid, a janitor, an elderly woman who might clean houses to supplement her Social Security." I turned to my son. "And you, Andrew, found that hilarious, as did Tyler." Andrew had the grace to look ashamed. "Mom, I'm sorry. It was thoughtless. We didn't mean any harm." "Didn't you?" Because from where I was standing, the laughter seemed quite genuine. The amusement at the idea that someone would dare speak to a mere maid seemed quite real. Tyler spoke for the first time, his voice small. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I didn't know it was you." Again, that same revealing phrase. None of them were sorry for the cruelty, only that the target had turned out to be someone they should have respected due to my position and wealth. "Let me show you something," I said, swiveling my computer monitor so they could see it. I pulled up the company's financial statements, the expansion plans, the valuation estimates from our last funding round, page after page of numbers that told the story of what I had built. "This company is valued at over $300 million, I said quietly. "Last year we did $420 million in revenue across all locations. We employ over 2,000 people, have a charitable foundation that funds food security programs across New England, and are consistently rated one of the best places to work in the region." I clicked to another screen showing my personal financial statements: investments, property holdings, assets. My personal net worth separate from the business is approximately $85 million. The silence in the room was absolute. Natalie's eyes had widened to an almost comical degree, fixed on the numbers on the screen. All of this, every store, every dollar, was built by the woman you just mocked as someone's maid, by the woman whose stories bore you, whose appearance embarrasses you, whose very existence seems to be an inconvenience to your social climbing. I turned the monitor back around, breaking the spell the numbers had cast. Up until today, my will left the majority of my assets to Andrew, with provisions for Tyler's education and future. The company leadership would have transferred to Andrew upon my retirement or death, with a substantial ownership stake. Andrew leaned forward, his expression a mixture of shame and dawning horror as he realized what I was implying. "Mom, please, we made a mistake, a terrible, thoughtless mistake, but surely you wouldn't what Andrew reconsider leaving my life's work to people who have shown nothing but contempt for me, who laugh at the idea that a woman my age might work as a maid, who find it amusing to instruct others not to speak to someone they deem beneath them?" "It was a joke," Natalie interjected, desperation creeping into her voice. "Everyone makes bad jokes sometimes. You can't possibly be considering disinheriting your own son and grandson over one stupid comment." "It wasn't one comment, Natalie. It was the culmination of years of disrespect, dismissal, and condescension. Years of watching you teach my grandson that I'm not worth listening to. Years of you canceling visits, rushing through holidays, speaking about me as if I'm senile or incompetent." I turned to Andrew. "And years of you allowing it. Of choosing the path of least resistance rather than standing up for your mother or teaching your son to respect his grandmother." The weight of truth settled over the room. No one spoke for several long moments. "What happens now?" Andrew finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Now you finish your shopping, if you still want to. You go to your hotel, have your fancy dinner at Maison Laurent, and your brunch with the well-connected Richardsons." I stood up, signaling that our conversation was ending. "And tomorrow I meet with my attorneys to revise my will and the company succession plan." "Mom, please." Andrew stood as well, his voice breaking. "We can fix this. Give us a chance to make it right." For a brief moment, looking at my son's face, so like Harold's, I felt my resolve waver. But then I remembered the sound of his laughter echoing through the store, joining his wife and son in mockery of someone they thought couldn't possibly matter. "I'm not doing this out of anger or revenge, Andrew. I'm doing this because today made me realize something important: respect can't be bought. If the only reason you would treat someone with dignity is because of what they can give you, then you don't deserve what they have to give." I walked to the door and opened it. "I have a business to run. David will show you out whenever you're ready to leave." As they filed past me, shock still evident on their faces, I felt a curious mixture of sadness and liberation. The family I thought I had, the son who I believed valued and respected me, the grandson I had hoped would carry forward our values, had been an illusion. It hurt terribly to acknowledge that truth, but there was also freedom in no longer needing to pretend. Before Natalie could exit, I stopped her with a gentle hand on her arm. "One more thing, Natalie. The maid you mocked today, she built something you couldn't even begin to comprehend. Remember that the next time you're tempted to judge someone by their appearance or age." The look of shame that finally crossed her face gave me no pleasure. But the straightening of my own spine, the certainty that I would no longer accept such treatment, felt like the first full breath I had taken in years. After they left, I called my oldest friend Martha. We had known each other since high school and had supported each other through marriages, children, career challenges, and widowhood. If anyone would understand what I was going through, it would be Martha. "You won't believe what just happened," I told her, recounting the scene at the grocery store and the subsequent confrontation in my office. "Oh, Josie," Martha sighed when I finished. "I'm so sorry. What an awful way to find out how they really feel. The strange thing is, part of me has known for years. I just didn't want to admit it to myself. Who wants to believe their own son thinks so little of them?" "You know," Martha said thoughtfully, "I went through something similar with my daughter Lisa a few years back. Not as dramatic as your situation, but the same basic problem. Lack of respect, taking me for granted, treating me like I was becoming senile when I disagreed with her." I remembered vaguely that Martha and Lisa had been estranged for a time, though they seemed close now. "What happened? How did you resolve it?" "I cut her off," Martha said simply. "Not just financially, though that was part of it, but emotionally too. I told her I wouldn't be available to her until she could treat me with basic respect. It took 6 months of silence before she reached out with a genuine apology. We rebuilt from there slowly. Now our relationship is better than ever, but it took that drastic step to make her realize what she was losing." "Do you think I'm overreacting by changing my will?" I asked, suddenly uncertain. "Not at all. In fact, it might be the wake-up call Andrew needs. Right now, he's had the luxury of taking you for granted because there have never been consequences. Sometimes people need to lose something to understand its value." After talking with Martha, I felt more confident in my decision. This wasn't about punishment. It was about protecting myself and my legacy. The company I had built deserved to be led by someone who understood its values. Respect for all people regardless of their position or appearance had always been a core principle at Josephine's Fresh Market. The next morning, I met with Jessica Morgan and her team to begin the process of restructuring my estate. The changes we outlined were comprehensive. A significant portion of my personal wealth would go to establish the Harold and Josephine Wilson Foundation, focused on food security education and entrepreneurship opportunities for women and minorities. 20% of the company shares would be distributed among long-term employees through an employee stock ownership program. Control of the company would pass to a board of trustees I selected, including several key executives who had been with me for years. I established a modest trust for Tyler, accessible when he turned 30, with the condition that he work at least 5 years in service-oriented roles, teaching social work or similar fields where empathy and respect for others were essential. For Andrew, I left our family home and a smaller trust, but no controlling interest in the business. As I signed the documents formalizing these changes, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For years, I had been holding on to the hope that Andrew would someday take an interest in the business, that he would become the kind of man who would honor what Harold and I had built. I had been clinging to an idea of family that no longer matched reality. "This is a significant change," Jessica observed as I signed the last page. "Are you certain this is what you want?" "More certain than I've been about anything in years," I replied. "The company deserves better than what Andrew and Natalie would bring to it, and frankly, so do I." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. I threw myself into work reviewing expansion plans, meeting with department heads, and finalizing a new community initiative I'd been developing. Andrew called repeatedly, but I wasn't ready to speak with him yet. I needed time to process everything that had happened. 6 days after the incident at the store, I finally agreed to meet Andrew for coffee at a small cafe near my office. He arrived looking haggard with dark circles under his eyes and a defeated slump to his shoulders. "Mom," he began as soon as I sat down. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. What happened at the store? There's no excuse. None. I'm deeply ashamed of how I acted and how I've allowed Natalie to treat you over the years." I nodded, acknowledging his words, but waiting to hear more before responding. "The thing is," he continued, "seeing you in that store, hearing David talk about your leadership, it made me realize how little I've known about your life. I've been so wrapped up in my own world and Natalie's social ambitions that I never bothered to really see you. And now that you know I'm wealthy and successful, you want to see me—" I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Andrew flinched. "I deserved that. But it's not about the money, Mom. Or at least that's not all it's about. Finding out about the business, about what you've built, it made me see you completely differently. And that's the problem, isn't it? I should have seen you clearly all along." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." Natalie and I have been talking, or arguing really, nonstop since that day. I've started to see so many things differently. The way she talks about people she considers beneath her. The way she's been teaching Tyler to value status over character. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of Harold that it made my heart ache. "We're separating, Mom. I moved out 3 days ago." This surprised me. Because of what happened at the store. That was the catalyst, but the problems were there all along. I just didn't want to see them. Or maybe I wasn't strong enough to face them. He looked directly at me, his eyes red-rimmed but clear. "I want you to know that I understand why you changed your will. I don't blame you. I wouldn't trust me with your legacy either, not after how I've behaved." His honesty caught me off guard. I had expected defensiveness arguments, attempts to change my mind. This humble acceptance was something entirely different. "What will you do now?" I asked. "I've rented an apartment. I'm fighting for joint custody of Tyler, and I've been thinking a lot about what I want my life to stand for." He hesitated, then added, "I'd like to understand more about the business you and Dad built, if you're willing to share that with me. Not because I expect anything from it, but because I've missed knowing this huge part of who you are." We talked for over 2 hours that day, really talked for the first time in years. I told him stories about the early days of the business, about Harold's vision, and my determination. I shared the struggles and triumphs, the lessons learned along the way, and Andrew listened, truly listened, in a way he hadn't since he was a boy. As we parted, he hugged me tightly. "I'm going to earn back your respect, Mom. It might take years, but I'm going to try every day." I believed him, and though I didn't say it then, I began to hope that perhaps something positive could emerge from the painful revelation at the grocery store. Over the next 6 months, a transformation took place within our family. Andrew followed through on his promise beginning therapy to understand why he had allowed and participated in the disrespect toward me. He filed for divorce from Natalie, a process that became contentious when she realized the full extent of what she had lost through her behavior. Not just access to my wealth, but the comfortable life she had built with Andrew. Tyler, caught in the middle of his parents' separation, began spending weekends with me. At first, our interactions were awkward, the weight of what had happened at the store hanging between us. But gradually, as we worked together in my garden or cooked meals in my kitchen, he began to open up. "Dad told me what you did," he said one Saturday as we planted tomatoes. "How you and Grandpa started with one little store and built it into this big company." "We did," I confirmed. "It took decades of hard work every day." "That's really cool," he said, his eyes showing genuine admiration. Would you maybe show me one of the stores sometime, like how everything works?" That request led to Saturday morning tours of different store locations where I introduced Tyler to managers and employees, explained inventory systems and marketing strategies, and watched his curiosity blossom. He was Harold's grandson through and through, analytical, observant, with a mind for systems and how they functioned. Andrew, meanwhile, began rebuilding his life. He took a leave of absence from his financial consulting job to reassess his priorities. To my surprise, he volunteered at a local food bank, discovering for himself the mission of food security that had always been central to our business. "I get it now, Mom," he told me, after a particularly challenging day serving meals at a homeless shelter. "Why you and Dad always insisted that the business had to serve a greater purpose than just making money. There's dignity in making sure people have access to good food, in treating everyone with respect, regardless of their circumstances." 3 months after our coffee shop meeting, Andrew asked if he could learn more about the business operations, not as a future owner or CEO, but simply to understand what his parents had created. I agreed, arranging for him to shadow different department heads to sit in on meetings to see firsthand the complexity and purpose of Josephine's Fresh Market. As for me, I found myself energized in a way I hadn't been in years. Freed from the emotional drain of trying to earn respect from people who were incapable of giving it, I focused on expanding the company's mission. We launched new community initiatives, partnered with local farms to improve sustainable agriculture practices, and established a training program for women entrepreneurs in the food industry. 6 months to the day after the incident at the grocery store, I invited Andrew and Tyler to dinner at my home. As we sat around the dining table that had seen so many family meals over the decades, I shared my plans for the future. "I've been thinking about the changes I made to my will and the company succession plan," I began. "While I stand by my decision that the company shouldn't automatically pass to you, Andrew, I've created a path for both you and Tyler to earn roles in its future, if that's something you want." I explained the new structure. Andrew could join the company in a junior executive role, working his way up based on merit rather than family connection. For Tyler, I had established a scholarship fund for his education and a potential place in the company's management training program when he was older, if he demonstrated the values and work ethic required. "This isn't about the money," I clarified. "It's about legacy and values. If either of you wants to be part of this company's future, you'll need to earn it through hard work, integrity, and treating every person, from the CEO to the newest cashier, with equal respect." Andrew nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "That's more than fair, Mom. More than I deserve after how I behaved." "It's not about what you deserve," I said gently. "It's about who you choose to be from this point forward." Tyler, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "Grandma, I've been learning a lot these past months, about the business, but also about how to treat people." He glanced at his father, then back to me. "I'm really sorry for laughing that day in the store. I didn't understand then, but I'm trying to understand now." His sincerity touched me deeply. At 12, he was at an age where values and character are forming. The incident at the store, painful as it had been, had created an opportunity to redirect that formation before it was too late. "That's all any of us can do, Tyler," I told him. "Learn from our mistakes and try to be better." As for Natalie, she had faded from our lives, appearing only in tense custody exchanges and through increasingly desperate attempts to reconnect with me, no doubt hoping to regain access to the wealth she had glimpsed. I maintained a polite distance, neither vindictive nor welcoming. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt, nor should they be. The changes I made to my will remained largely intact, though I did modify some provisions to reflect the positive changes I'd seen in Andrew and Tyler. The bulk of my estate would still go to charitable causes and to rewarding the employees who had helped build the company, but I created new opportunities for my son and grandson to earn their places in the business through demonstrating the values I held dear. The revelation at the grocery store had been painful, even devastating. But from that pain came clarity, honesty, and ultimately the chance for genuine relationships built on respect rather than obligation or advantage. Sometimes it takes losing everything to discover what truly matters and who truly deserves a place in your heart and your legacy. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision about family relationships or inheritance? How do you balance love with the need for respect? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about standing up for yourself and honoring your own worth. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to demand the respect you deserve. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in how we treat each other.